Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I'm just about to bring up the image here with the All Stars. So I suppose you should just get us started there in the conversation while I'm doing it. Is there anyone in goals? I think that's standing out pretty
Yeah,
obvious.
yeah. Well, I'd say there's probably three in the running realistically. Owen Murphy after his heroics the other day, and even before that, I thought Nicky Quaid was outstanding in the Munster final this year. I thought it was as good as game as he's had for Limerick. And I'd say even though he didn't start their first game, I'd say Eibhear Quilligan is probably in the mix for a nominee anyway, given the saves he pulled off the other day. And having not started the first championship match, I thought he was very good thereafter. So I'd say it's probably one of Quaid, Murphy, or Quilligan. But at the moment, you'd have to say Murphy. The balance is probably tipped in favour of Owen Murphy. Now saying that, a decent bit will come down to the All-Ireland final. I would say Limerick went after Murphy's puck out fairly hard in last year's All-Ireland final, and there was times in the first half where he found it really, really difficult to get the ball away and get the ball to the destination. So, but he's in pole position. He's probably going to be tested a fair bit in the final too, you'd say. So he's definitely he's firmly the number one at the moment anyway.
Yeah, so then like in terms of the cornerbacks, Mikey Butler, of course, I think we can nearly chalk final again. Would you be okay with that?
Sorry, I lost you there for a second, but Mikey Butler's definitely in pole position again. I think his duel with be it Peter Casey or maybe potentially Aaron Gillan in the All-Ireland final is going to be fascinating. But his form has not dropped. The goal in the Leinster final, the runs forward in the semi-final last day, putting Tony Kelly on the back foot. Like, it's really difficult as a player like that. His first inter-county season last year, he picks up an All-Star, Young Hurler of the Year, plays in the All-Ireland final, keeps Tony Kelly quiet. It's really difficult to back that up.
Yeah.
But he's made a fair effort at it. And I remember Paul Murphy's first 5 years with Kilkenny, I think, he won All-Stars. He won All-Stars the year they won All-Ireland. He won All-Star 11, 12. They took a break in 13. He won again 14, 15. Butler's come in and made an instant impact like that again. So to me, I think he's definitely in pole position for that number 2 shirt. Now, Mike Casey wouldn't be a million miles away. And I think he's been really, really consistent this year as well.
And Adam Hogan would be, in the mix as well. And I know it was very difficult for all the defenders for Clare the other day, but he'd have to be in the conversation. I think Darren Morrissey's had a pretty good year for Galway. A couple of the Dublin defenders have done all right too, but I think by dint of conceding so much against Clare, it would be very difficult to make a case for putting in a Dublin defender in there. Is there anyone from any of the other counties? I think Mark Fitzgerald had a good year for Waterford, despite, sometimes at the back they were a little bit open. Who would you be looking at for the other cornerback spot? Are we eventually going to end up with are we going to end up with two?
Yeah, we're going to end up with 2 fullbacks.
No, I don't think we can do that.
Wow. Then we're going to be leaving Hugh. Then we're going to have to leave either Hugh Lawler or Dan Morrissey off the team.
Yeah.
So I think you can only do that if there's an outstanding cornerback to put in their place. I don't think Barry Nash has been good this year. Don't think he's been at the levels he was last year where he was nominated for Hurler of the Year.
Teams have pushed up on him more, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. They've not allowed him to I suppose maybe the secret is out a small bit and teams are not allowing him to take on the ball maybe like he did in other years. I just thought Dan Morrissey was outstanding last Saturday night. He's just that kind of silent assassin in defence. He always delivers. When was the last time you really saw him in trouble in a game, particularly in around fullback? I think fullback is probably his best spot. He's a very good wingback, and he's obviously an all-star wingback as well from 18. I just think he's so solid there. Listen.
Hugh Lawler's been brilliant. He has been absolutely brilliant, and he very much won the battle against Conor Whelan earlier in the year, and then so much so that Conor Whelan moved out to the half-forward line for when they met in the Leinster final. He's been really good, but I think Dan Morrissey has game on game been up against tougher opposition because Munster is tougher, and he was excellent the other day. So for me, it's got to be Dan Morrissey, and I don't think that we can kind of do the cop-out of picking 2 fullbacks here.
Well, the only thing is, it's not a cop-out if we have an outstanding cornerback to put in there instead of them. I think if you're picking 2 fullbacks over if Sean Finn was in the reckoning here and you're picking between Sean Finn and Mikey Butler for one corner, and then you're putting two fullbacks in at 3 and 4, I think then we have an issue. But if there's give me the outstanding cornerback, like we put Mike Casey cornerback.
Well, I certainly don't think he's played at Hugh Lawler's level, even though he's been very good. But I mean, this is the thing, though. Like, are we going to take the cop out of saying, well, you generally have 2-man full back lines, so maybe you can get away with having 2 full backs?
Would you be happy as a manager to have both Dan Morrissey and Hugh Lawler as a 2-man full back line?
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, yeah, they're like you want someone who's a bit quicker on the ground, even though neither of them really get done for pace. But yeah, they don't normally fit the profile of 2 fullbacks you'd have. They normally fit the exact same profile of one of the 2 you'd have.
Yeah, so you could send Mikey as you could maybe send Mikey as, you'd probably have Mikey and one of them inside. I personally don't think it's a cop out in this instance, because I don't think there's an obvious omission. And I think, I'll put it to you this way, lucky is probably not the right word, but I think someone would be getting an all-star, a cornerback in our list here that maybe, is not that they're not fully deserving, but like if we're leaving out an out cornerback, I've no issue. We'll go with the fullback, and we won't put two fullbacks in 3 and 4. But I don't think that's the case. Maybe that'll change. Maybe Barry Nash will have an outstanding final, and we'll have an obvious second de facto cornerback. He's not a de facto cornerback either. But you know what I mean. I think if we're leaving out someone obvious, I've no issue there. Remember 95. Brian Lohan got, like, this was a bit mad now, because Brian Lohan got the fullback at 3 and Kevin Keenan got the all-star cornerback, and he never played cornerback in his life, and you wouldn't play him cornerback. But I think there's a good bit more flexibility with those 2 boys.
Yeah, being honest, I think we do have to pick the 2 of them here. But by picking Morrissey at 3 and Lawler at 4, I think we're slightly acknowledging that we think that Morrissey has been more impressive so far, and that's not to do down Lawler. He's been brilliant, but it's just the quality of opponents that Morrissey has come up against.
I think if you were sending, I think you could send Hugh Lawler as a tracker. Like, he could easily float around anywhere there, as you saw with his point the other day. So I'd have no issue there. If it was Mikey Butler and Dan Morrissey inside as a 2-man, no problem. If you had to send Hugh Lawler out, he's played centre back this year for Kilkenny as well. He can play centre back, wing back. He can play cornerback if he had to, and he can definitely play full back too.
Before we go too much further, of the teams that have been knocked out a while ago at this stage, your Tips, your Corks, your Waterfords, your Wexfords, Dublins, Antrim, Westmeath, so on and so forth. Is there any player that we should be talking about for this before we get too deep into it? Because we'll just end up forgetting about them.
I'm just thinking from a Tipperary point of view. Probably, to be honest with you, on the nominees for the keeper, Reece Shelley would probably come into the conversation, to be fair. As regards other players,
Jake Morris, maybe, even though he was very quiet the last day. So, that was...
Yeah, I was kind of thinking when Tipperary were beaten whether he would get a nominee or not.
Yeah.
Because if you were looking at midway through the Munster Championship, you're thinking definitely he's definitely going to be in the mix here. Maybe not now. Alan Tynan, you would have been saying maybe at different stages in Munster that he would have been in the mix. Probably was a bit quiet maybe thereafter, I would say.
Brian O'Mara at stages.
But I don't know if he would come into that kind of mix. Cork were obviously eliminated early.
Patrick Horgan.
Patrick Horgan had a brilliant season, you'd have to say. Dispelling any questions about whether he should come back or not, or whether he's over the top or anything like that. Far from it. He's shown that he's absolutely flying as well as he ever was. So will he get an all-star nominee? Yeah, Kieran Joyce, solid again, very solid at centre back. Again, I don't know whether either of those will get nominees at the when in the heel of the hunt, as you'd say yourself, just because it's so stacked towards the final 2 and to a lesser extent the final 4. But those few definitely deserve a mention. From a Dublin point of view, would anybody stand out? Donald Burke, had he not come off, after whatever it was, 8 minutes or whatever against Clare, he'd probably be maybe in the conversation for an all-star, but he probably will get a nominee, I'd say, at the end of it.
Yeah, probably not too many others. Wexford, I don't know if anybody really kind of blew me away from Wexford this year because they were just a bit disappointing. Waterford, I've kind of mentioned Mark Fitzgerald. I don't know, would I be mentioning too many others really? Would you?
Patrick Fitzgerald, like if he played more games, he'd be in probably the young hurler of the year conversation maybe. But by the fact that he only started one championship game, he probably won't be in that conversation realistically. But he's definitely a player we're going to be talking a hell of a lot about over the next couple of years.
Yeah, Dara Egerton, according to SSRI, was very consistent cornerback for Westmeath this year. Their best player overall, nearly. Conal Cunning, very good, says Grode Howley for Antrim. Okay, so coming back to the All-Star selection here, will we just throw in a few Limerick names here almost straight away? Like Kyle Hayes is definitely getting in here, left wing back, I would imagine.
Yeah, to be honest with you, like our Burns and Hayes both kind of nailed on at the moment. Burns had two man of the matches throughout the Munster campaign, and when things weren't going that well, he was probably one of the ones that was flying high. Hayes was really good during Munster, and he was outstanding in the second half the other day. He probably maybe took his form to another level even the other day, and that little scoop pass or that little scoop point over the bar, Kieran was talking there about coolness under pressure. Like that was just so cool. A lot of other lads would have panicked. He was going to be hooked. If he struck the ball any other way, he was probably going to be hooked. So, that's worrying from a Kilkenny point of view that he's carrying that sort of form into the All-Ireland final.
And I wonder, though, does David Blanchfield come into conversation here? Because he's really impressed me, I have to say.
Yeah, he's going to be one of the most important players in the final, you'd imagine, because he's probably going to be detailed on one of those big kind of marquee half forwards. He comes into the conversation all right. I don't think he's been at the level of the players we picked at 5 or 7 yet. Maybe a big final performance, and he might come into it. Centre back one is an interesting one. Like
your John Conlon's,
Well, I tell you what, there's not too many more. Kilkenny, like Richie Reid has not played that much this year. David Blanchfield has been in centre back at different stages. David Blanchfield probably has a good bit of credit in the bank at the moment, but you couldn't put him in as your probably number 6. Will O'Donoghue played his first ever game at 6 for Limerick the other day. Declan Hands missed a fair bit of action. You'd imagine it's going to be very, very difficult for him to be in the mix. Conlon obviously definitely in the mix. He missed a bit of time obviously coming off the day against Clare. And Galway, like Dottie Burke played 6 for most of the year. Then he played full back against Limerick. So like John Conlon's probably the only obvious number 6, is he, at the moment?
It is John Conlon. Maybe you could make a push for Kieran Joyce, but it feels like Cork have been out for about 6 months.
You'd be making a big push now, in fairness.
Yeah. Rumours that Blanchfield is injured for the final, says 36 and counting. We'll see. Hugh Paddy, I assume that Dermot Burns of Carlow at 5, yeah.
Dermot Byrne. You leave off that famous point at the end of the Joe McDonagh final that broke our hearts.
We're pretty happy with this team so far, aren't we?
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting.
Crackety Ash is laughing at John Conlon here. I don't know why, because he's excellent.
If Will O'Donoghue starts the All-Ireland final at 6 and goes very, very well, he could yet edge Conlon out. See, the thing about this is O'Donoghue has a fair bit of credit in the bank from his midfield games earlier on this year, particularly when Limerick were struggling. Like, are you putting Will O'Donoghue in middle of the field? Is Will O'Donoghue a midfield all-star at the moment? Darragh O'Donovan definitely is anyway, because he's in the hurler of the year conversation at the minute.
Okay, so let's get that in there straight away, and we'll talk about who are the options for midfield. Is there anybody that you'd look at from Galway and say they're a midfield option?
I thought Sean Lalane had a very good season with Galway now. Yeah. Whether he's in that mix,
he wasn't always midfield now. He was wing back against Limerick.
Yeah, he was.
I wouldn't consider him a midfielder. Injured for a lot of the year, played in the forwards and kind of as a sweeper. The Kilkenny options again, like it's been a movable feast there. So it hasn't been the same player all the time.
No, that's anyone in Kilkenny will tell you that's their big kind of worry going into the All-Ireland final in particular. Cathal Malone was good probably until Sunday. He probably had a really good year until Sunday. I'd say realistically, and he drops out there a fair bit. David Fitzgerald is going to be high up in this conversation, isn't he?
I just see him as a straight up wing forward based on how Clare play.
Okay. O'Donoghue's probably like the thing is O'Donoghue, if he plays centre back in the All-Ireland final, can we pick a fella midfield that's probably going to play centre back?
You see, I still think if Hannon's right, he's going to play and O'Donoghue will return to midfield. So I think this is a little bit of a tricky one for us. But just while we're weighing it up, Adrian Mullen from midfield. Again, he's had injuries. But his comeback the other day, and I know he doesn't necessarily sit there midfield all the time, but he is fairly much in around that middle area all the time.
Yeah, he's usually in around the middle third. He obviously, what did he miss? He played 20-something minutes against Wexford, missed the Leinster final. He'd have to have a fair final now. But if he hits 3 or 4, a lot of how Kilkenny will get on the All-Ireland final will come down to him and his fitness, and whether, like, he was very good the other day considering the amount of time he's missed. I think he was 7 weeks out. If he is a big final, Kilkenny have a big chance. I don't think you could say he's an all-star at the minute, though. I think he's going to have to be close to man of the match in the All-Ireland final to get that.
And do you think, like, has O'Donoghue had a big enough year to like, forget about him playing centre back the other day? Like, has he had a big enough year to be midfielder?
Oh God, I think so. Yeah, I think when Limerick were struggling, he was one of the war dogs that was pulling them through games. Now I look back at the Munster final again recently, and I'd say he was a happy man. That free wasn't given at the end to Clare, because he went through on goal and got hooked really, really tamely, and the ball went wide, and the result of puck out nearly ended up in a Clare free. But I think against Tip he was outstanding, against Cork as well. No, I'd have no issue having O'Donoghue in there. But Hugh Paddy mentioned Ryan Taylor. Had he not come off the other day, he was in the mix. Now I think his confidence was down a small bit from even looking back at the Clare game. He missed a couple of chances in the Munster final. In the Dublin game, he kind of didn't really want to take on shots from what I could see. I think O'Donoghue's got a fair bit more credit in the bank now than maybe Ryan Taylor.
Yeah, and I've thrown him in there. So, geez, this is looking fairly Limerick heavy.
Well, it's like this. Limerick haven't been going that well, and they hadn't been going well into the All-Ireland semi-final, and we still have 5 Limerick players. We've already gone through 1 to 9.
Yeah, Grode Howley says Paddy Deegan, but I suppose you could say he's played in the half-backs as well. I don't know if you'd necessarily say... And fair enough, Will O'Donoghue didn't play midfield the last day, but I just think you'd have to give it to Will O'Donoghue and Darragh O'Donovan in this situation. Wing forward then. So, like, David Fitzgerald is in the mix here. Kevin Cooney's been quite good this year as well. And I know he's played inside a lot, but he's often wearing the number 12 and he does come out.
His setup for Mannion the other day was gorgeous, wasn't it? Just lovely. Like, you don't see that type of a pass now. It was bounced on the ground to him through a couple of bodies. Absolutely beautiful. He had a very, very good season. And he's, the likes of him, and probably Sean Lalane, Ronan Glenn and Darren Morrissey, Jack Grealish are kind of bright spots for Galway, even though they ended the year on a very, very disappointing note.
I've made an executive decision there.
Yeah, it was just a matter of where he went with putting Shane O'Donnell in. Even the other day again, just when things weren't going well for Clare, like, he's just, how do you mark him? He's so unique, and even the way he kind of turns the hurl as well and controls the ball, he's just really, really difficult to handle. And his goal the other day, it has to be that type of goal to beat Owen Murphy. It has to be that Gerard Hegarty goal in the All-Ireland final almost.
And he tripped Tommy Walsh on the way in, ran into Tommy Walsh, pushed him over his leg. I mean, it's total foul, but players have been doing that for years in both codes. But yeah, you don't get blown for that.
Forwards get away with forwards can do whatever they want.
Yeah. And so just bringing this up here, Tom Morrissey's let's not even bother wasting our time talking about it. Tom Morrissey's in there for sure.
Tom Morrissey's definitely in. I place a hell of a lot of stock on the Limerick lads that pulled them through when a lot of the real marquee names maybe were struggling, and Tom Morrissey was right up there. Definitely has to be there. Definitely has to be right in there.
Does Tony Kelly get in here?
Being honest, I wouldn't have him in. I don't think it was his best year. I think he's had a lot better years than this. He had a quiet semi-final. He was brilliant against Dublin. I'm not going to place that much stock on that game. I know he got 4 points in the Munster final, but I thought, if you were chatting to Tony Kelly after, I'd say he would have said I should have had 8 points in the Munster final. 2 block down efforts, a couple of balls that dropped short, a couple of harmless enough kind of wides. I don't think so either. I don't think so, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm just going to fill out a couple of other spots that are fairly obvious. Aaron Gallant, Owen Cody. I presume we're putting PJ Reid full forward.
Yeah, full forward or centre forward. And again, some people might say, oh, you're saying Tony Kelly only got a point against Kilkenny. TJ Reid didn't score from play. But I think, like, if you look at the impact that TJ had on the game against Clare, even winning a couple of frees, setting up the goal. Probably should have had a goal himself. I'd say he's probably disappointed.
Knocking over a sideline.
Knocked over a sideline. Do you know what I mean? I think he scored 3 from play in the Leinster final. We're talking about how older players are managed now. I know he had a knock coming out of the All-Ireland Club campaign with Ballyhale, but it probably suits the like of TJ and Shane O'Donnell, who's had knocks in recent years, just to rock up for championship, really, doesn't it? Like when you have that kind of muscle memory in the bank, I think it probably suits them just to rock up, keep them fresh. And I'd probably have TJ Reid at 11, Shane, and I'd probably have Conor Whelan inside. And I think you have it. Yeah, I think you have it all done.
Yeah. Okay. You read out the team there, and I'll count up how much there is for each team while you're at that.
So we've Owen Murphy in the goals, Mikey Butler 2, Dan Morrissey 3, Hugh Lawler 4, Dermot Burns 5, John Condon 6, Kyle Hayes 7, Darragh O'Donovan 8, Will O'Donoghue 9, Shane O'Donnell 10, TJ Reid 11, Tom Morrissey 12, Aaron Gillan 13, Conor Whelan 14, and Owen Cody 15. It's a fair team, I tell you that.
Yeah, like the Kilkenny lads, I think that's 5. So Murphy, Lawler, TJ Reid, Owen Cody, and did I skip one there? I think I might have. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's only 4. Sorry, Murphy, Butler, Lawler, TJ Reid, and Owen Cody. Yeah, it is 5. Then Limerick, Morrissey, Burns, Hayes, Darragh O'Donovan, Will O'Donoghue, Tom Morrissey, Aaron Gillan. So that's 7 for them. And then you've got 1 Galway and you've got 2 Clare. So actually, like, it's a nice little spread there. I wonder, will it be like that when it comes to the final?
A couple of players that were, maybe are unlucky or played themselves out. Dermot Ryan would have been in the conversation, I'd say, maybe before the semi-final. He was I think he was player of the month in May. It's some great performances. Just those kind of low percentage shots that he takes on, maybe over the shoulder, maybe cost him at times the other day. David Fitzgerald probably is unlucky as well. Depends. If Will O'Donoghue plays the final centre back and has a really good performance, you could potentially be looking at him 6. Maybe if David Fitzgerald would slot back into a midfield slot, maybe we'll see in time. But Seamus Flanagan's another one that's mentioned there. Maybe didn't shoot the lights out on the scoreboard the other day, but I thought he was brilliant even coming out the pitch. He played a different kind of a role in the second half the other day. If he were to have a big final, I think he'd be really high in the conversation as well.
Yeah, and I think like this is based up to now. We obviously know that the final could totally change what this team is, but I think as Hugh Waz says here, that's why they're the early All-Stars detox.